Sorry about that. So I'll just call this meeting to order again. It's 7:05 PM. And I call this meeting of the Maurice's Campground Ops Sub-Working Group to order. The first thing on our agenda is to review and approve a scope of work, or maybe we won't approve it tonight. I don't know. It does seem like we got an extension to June 28th. I got an email. It's not been signed, but it seems like there's been an agreement reached to extend the due diligence out to the end of June. Harry, if you could bring up the file.
Yep.
And
okay, there we go.
We can also bring up the letter from Fred. I think, did everybody read the letter that Fred sent us?
Yes.
I have.
Okay. Okay, so where we have scope of work, review the financial pro forma and supporting documents submitted by the sellers in response to the purchase agreement, and seek any additional information from town or sellers necessary to complete review. And then the deliverables here would be a written report, which provides an analysis of the seller's financial pro forma, which includes whether the property revenue and operating costs are reasonable for a project of its size and are consistent with industry standards, identifying areas, if any, where the costs do not meet these standards, the financial feasibility of continued operation of the campground and/or retail store by the town, and whether there are areas where more detailed information is needed. So that's what's written now. So I guess we'll discuss that, and we can discuss what finance committee members or some members, I guess it's not the whole finance committee. Did you guys meet, Fred?
No, this was, we have a little working group, and then I passed some of what we were working on back to several members who can't be part of this task force, who are accountants, just to see what they thought was reasonable and what kinds of questions they would have. So it was a series of one-to-ones and gradually accreting questions until we had a document that I put together.
Okay. Okay, so let me just bring that up on my screen here so we can go over. So
Okay.
does anybody on the working group have any input on this right now? Nancy?
I wasn't sure if this was the place or not where we asked them to pull out the difference between the employees in the store compared to the campground.
Well, so that's something that I was waiting to meet with John until we got the questions sort of flushed out that people had, because I didn't want to meet with him, ask him questions, spend the time with him, and then have a bunch more questions come up that I wasn't prepared for. But so I'm in Canada until Wednesday, and I'll be meeting with him. That's the kind of questions that I think we need to get directly from the sellers, if we can, first,
Okay.
before we take the information to the CPA. But with, or I shouldn't necessarily say CPA, financial professional, I guess. Harry, is that right?
Yeah, because when we did the evaluation on 95 Lawrence Road, for example, we found a consultant whose practice was basically reviewing applications like that. So she was not a CPA, but she had a detailed knowledge of that particular type of project and gave us some good advice.
Okay, I'm also meeting with someone from SCORE, which is a nonprofit consultant group that specializes in helping small businesses and municipalities with these types of things. Meeting with them on Thursday morning, and then hopefully they'll meet with this group, with us as well as a group, but they just want to sort of get a synopsis of what we're looking at and what we're looking at doing and that sort of thing. So I'm meeting with someone, a group of people from SCORE.
I wonder, Mike, if it would, I'm sorry, somebody else
Yep.
wants to speak.
Oh, I was just going to say the questions looked very thorough and seemed to have captured everything we were talking about that I remembered. So that's all I needed to say.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that, I don't know if it would be helpful to just go through Fred's memorandum,
Yeah,
because there are some things that there are answers to and other things that there aren't.
right. That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So to the degree that I'll speak to how, what this memorandum represents, it's not the entire finance committee, it's the people who form this little group within it that are working with you. And then, as I said, a couple of resources behind as this, to kind of validate things and get a little more nuance. If I were going to describe in general what the finance committee's perspective is right now, it would be in the short term, that would be, I guess, between now and June 28th, to ask for a little more detail on some of the areas in the P&L and whatever that are really not descriptive, but so that we could understand as a town, for example, what rent really means and how much money the campgrounds is throwing off in terms of making it possible for the town to use that money for other things. Then there's longer term questions that in many ways are unanswerable now and should not, in our opinion, be gone after in the next 6 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever it is,
Right.
are good questions to ask in the follow-on and possibly before the purchase and sale is executed. And that would be in the area of things that are already being looked into, like the cesspool / septic issues and whatever, and the real cost behind them. So I wouldn't expect that we would have answers to that in the short term, but the CPA, and I think I noticed in Harry's revision of the scope of work that there is a bullet that says, identify any additional information that would be useful or necessary.
Mhm.
That obviously encompasses a lot, but my hope or my guess would be that we could take some of the questions that we developed in the first section of our memo and at least provide those to the CPA, and they could then decide, or whoever, the professional, whether those are questions that are pertinent and ought to be answered in a particular level of detail. It doesn't have to be specifically a set of questions in the scope of work, I don't think. It could be an addendum to, or it could just be produced or delivered informally. But we think that things like some of those questions are pretty critical to have answers to. For example, salaries, how is it broken out? Somebody mentioned that already. Those seem like appropriate questions to ask now so we understand the business. And,
Yeah.
That's pretty much the whole deal.
Yeah, I think we need, go ahead, Harry.
I was gonna say, I think it's important to know whether any of the salaries were paid to the owners or not.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised, based on, at this point, almost a year's worth of conversations with the sellers, that the operation is very fluid and that employees may be assigned on a daily or even an hourly basis to the store or to the campground and flip
Mhm.
back and forth. They may not have a breakdown between the store and the campground. It doesn't hurt to ask, but
Yeah.
I don't be surprised if the answer is we have no idea. I think it's more important to identify the profit that flows to the owners from this operation. And then we can look at that, say it's $400,000, just to pick a number, and decide what portion of that is their managing the campground and what portion of that is their ownership. And we can perhaps make that judgment knowing what that number is.
I think one of the issues
Go ahead.
for the finance committee is that there are some implied costs and transitional moments that are out there in the future a little bit. For example, the transitional moment when the purchase and sale is completed and now we own it. And now what does owning it mean exactly? Have we already found a management company? Will it take us some time to find a management company? What terms and conditions will they set for what they're willing to manage? Are questions I would hope someone would ask ahead of our actually owning the property, because so much of the potential liability to the town is predicated on well, among other things, shared liability between us and the management company, I assume, that the
Well-
town doesn't hold all the liability.
Sure, Fred, I think that's sort of outside of the scope of what we would ask a CPA. but
Right, that's
that
what I'm
is-
saying. These are later
Yeah.
on questions. These are
Right.
not questions you would ask right now.
Yeah. But I think as far as the CPA goes, the stuff about, teasing out what is paid to the owners and what is as as profit and what's paid in labor is kind of pertinent. But do you want to go through the questions in your memo, basically, and see if any of them, I guess this group can determine if any of them belong in this document right now, or if they should be supplied by maybe the finance committee to whoever we hire as a separate list of things that, the finance committee has of questions pertaining to that.
I think for the sake of expediency, we'd be okay with that if, unless there's questions or I don't think of them so much as questions as areas of inquiry, you know what I mean? There's sections, like
Sure, yeah.
verification of the accuracy of the P&L has a few different pieces to it, but that's all it is. It's just saying, you gave us a document that is partially handwritten, where some of the lines don't line up, where some of the lines are not descriptive. Wouldn't I, as a CPA or as a town, want to go in and get more detail on that, just to verify that the information is correct and that it's apples to apples. So that's really that whole section. The section on P&L clarification and detail is what we've been talking about. What's the rent detail, the salaries detail, understanding the insurance and liability stuff. And then tax impact. Somebody asked what the average tax bill implication might be for this thing.
I think we already know that.
Yeah, so that's really the short-term stuff. And I don't think there's anything particularly radical in there. I think the most radical thing that anyone in the finance committee asked for was whether a CPA could produce a speculative, but based on history, forward-looking operating P&L, a guesstimate of where costs might go in the next 3-4 years.
Okay, Harry, you had your hand up?
Yeah, a couple of things. Trying to separate the issue into a couple of pieces. So one of them is the validation of the information. And it seems to me that there are 3 possible levels, if you will. The P&S requires the sellers to certify that the information is, true, accurate, and complete to the best of their knowledge. So that's one level. An accountant might be able to give you a compiled financial statement, which is something less than an audited financial statement. It means that we've taken the information we've been given at face value and we've organized it for you. An audited financial statement, having dealt with auditors, means looking at enough of the scraps of paper, the original documents from which this is generated, to make sure that they're accurate. That's a big deal. I mean, the town spends $20,000-$30,000 getting the town's finances audited. It wouldn't surprise me if that's thousands of dollars to do. Do we need that level of certainty? So that's one question. And then there are some, and it may very well be that there is no computerized accounting system behind all this. It may be that, the handwritten documents, well, it's hard to imagine that there isn't a payroll somewhere, for example. And it's hard to imagine that there isn't a, employee withholding remittances, to back up the payroll. But Schedule K1, for example, has no information on it that's useful. I took a look at one today, and it's even more condensed than the information we've got.
And I don't, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think there is a Schedule K1. I don't think there's any corporation or separate entity. Is
I
there?
think there might
Well,
be,
you could have a Schedule K1 from a partnership. I was a partner in a law firm for a long time, and I saw, a couple dozen Schedule K1s over the period of my career.
But
So-
my K1 for my business is basically like how much passes through. It's like a
Yeah,
line
exactly.
item. It's
So-
really, there's no
really-
detail in it.
really, the point of even mentioning Schedule K1 in our document was just in reaction to if we were to hire a financial expert, at this point, and I'm not trying to cast any aspersions here, but it's just basic fact. We are trusting that the numbers are correct at present. And knowing the people involved and believing they're the most honest people on the planet and whatever, if I were a hired professional and said, I'm going to do a deeper dive, what documents, what data do I have to go after that I could see short of an audit? I'm not talking about a full audit. I'm just saying, what can I look at that would line up with the purchase P&L and say, yep, I get it. I need a little more detail here. I need a little more detail there. That isn't purely anecdotal. If that's the case, and I think all of us have had enough experience to know that sometimes you can't get the information you want. And what it reverts to is we've got to take their word, or this is what we've got, or this is the totality of it. And you go, okay, but you use that information to go forward in terms of tempering your expectations or your ambitions. So that's really the whole point of this, is just say, if you're going to hire a professional and they have nothing to look at that we haven't already seen, why bother?
And I guess if I can
Yeah, go ahead, please.
talk a little longer, the septic, you're absolutely correct that it's a potentially huge liability. But the way the purchase and sale agreement is structured is, if we can't get a 5-year waiver, we're not obligated to go through with this deal. I for one, would not advocate spending $6.5 million to buy this and then spending $5 million to put a septic system in, and then deciding that we're going to do something else with the property, so that money's wasted.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
not
a non-starter for me. If we don't get a waiver that allows us to operate the campground without upgrading the septic systems for a period long enough to satisfy the Gauthiers, and it may not be 6 years, then this deal becomes fiscally infeasible, period.
Mhm.
So let me just say again, from the finance committee perspective, the only reason that's in our memo is because we're trying to summarize what we understand the situation to be, not because we're trying to direct things one way or the other.
Right.
We're trying to be as neutral about the desirability of this purchase as possible, and just take a financial perspective. So yes, it's there. I think we understand that there's an extension being requested, and it's the select board and the TA and someone else's decision to do the go, no go if it doesn't line up in the way that you would prefer, right? But that wouldn't be, all we're saying is, we're aware of this bogey out there, and if you don't get the extension, it's a bogey.
Oh, yeah, it's a deal breaker.
Maybe.
I mean, at least in terms of operating the campground,
Yeah.
not necessarily the land transfer.
Let me just comment on and add to what Fred was saying, which is, with regard to the box of this project, whatever the scope of this is, to go out and get a CPA, I'd like to know what it is we're expecting, because honestly, if we're looking for validation, I don't know what it is that we're going to get. Are we looking to have somebody who's going to say, okay, go ahead and do this? Or can we just sit back and say, imagine we buy this property and we have to then run it to break even until we can make a decision what we're going to do? I think we can do that. How much is it going to, we can put a business pro forma. This is what we think it would take to run this for this amount. It's going to be as accurate as anything we're going to get from any accountants with this. And I'm not sure why we're, it's not clear to me why we're going out to hire an accountant and what it is that you're expecting this accountant to come back with.
Carrie?
Well, at least from my perspective, I would like for some independent third party to look at the numbers and say, I don't see anything here that jumps out me as being egregiously inaccurate. So that's one thing I'd like to get for it. And I'd also like to be able to tell the voters at a town meeting that, well, we did more than just look at this on the back of an envelope. We did some due diligence. We made some inquiries.
And
We
yet the
asked some
business is on the
reasonable,
back of an envelope. I mean,
well, that may be, Jeff, but I'd like to be able to tell them that we did what we felt was the best we could do under the circumstances. And maybe that will be enough to convince people. Maybe it won't be. I don't know. But, I don't want to stand up there and say, I looked at the financials and it's okay, trust me. I don't want to be there.
Yeah, I mean, if this were an independent purchase of, like buyer and seller, but it's a town that's purchasing it. And I think it's just important to get third-party verification of what we see, because the taxpayers aren't looking at all this, the residents and the voters. So we need to have, I think it'd be irresponsible to not have a third party look at it and make verification of what we believe to be true, looking at the documents. And that's essentially the purpose of it.
I feel like I fall halfway between here in a sense, in that I agree with you. I think we do need to get a third party. My only concern is that we give a directive to that third party that if there are certain questions that we would like to have greater depth on, which I think was the point here of our memo, please go after that information. If you can't get it for some reason, if it doesn't exist, if it's only a handwritten note or whatever, we want to know that. That would just be information we need to go forward. Not that it necessarily is a deal breaker, as the sewer system could be, but just, I accept that, that things may have been done more informally than other businesses would do it. It's okay. So how informal and how much detail is possible is the next question.
Well,
just so long as this professional has something to do, some directive.
Yeah. Well, I think that they'd be, I guess, Harry, can you bring back up the deliverables up onto the screen? What we're expecting as deliverables, because there are some deliverables written into this. And then the other thing I think is, like, if the owners had been, if they had been savvy with Excel, they probably could have put in an Excel spreadsheet, and we'd be ignoring, like, that the issue of it being handwritten would be off the table, and the numbers would still be the same, right? So there's a certain amount of validation you get from having things printed in a profit and loss statement that's run through QuickBooks or something like that.
Sure.
But the reality is, like, that's how they're keeping their books, and probably how they've been keeping their books for 50 some odd years, by old fashioned ledger.
Let me just say to that, there's a sort of a yes and in there, in that it says very clearly on the P&L that the numbers are derived from their tax returns of 2019, 20, and 21, which so far we've not been given access to.
Right, and they've explicitly said that's they're basically certifying that that's true.
And they've declined to furnish those.
Correct.
But it's also important to know that, we're not really buying a business. This is ancillary to the purchase. It's something that the sellers want to see happen, and frankly, I think the select board wanted to see happen as well. But it's not the whole deal. And also, the real question here is it profitable, and to what extent? And can the town make the assumption that it will be able to generate revenue or break even on this operation going forward? Or will it cost the town some money, which I don't see that happening in the current structure, but maybe it's not a lot of money, and maybe it covers some of the debt service. But those are the kinds of questions that, are going to come up. And that's why it's important to have verification of what we see as their profit, and what does it cost us as a town to just own the property, and Yeah, if we bought the property and didn't do anything with it, it would still cost the town a debt service. Like if there was no deal with the campground for that operations, we'd still be paying that debt service regardless. So is this going to be a benefit to the town? To what extent? And I think that's really what we're asking here. Yeah, so.
Just a couple of things. Some of the questions in Fred's memo, particularly the operating budget detail, might be usefully addressed to the Gauthiers in the initial first, because they may be able to clear up what they know and what they don't know, and what they can tell us. Like, for example, what do they pay their employees as an hourly rate?
Right. That's
You
the
know,
stuff we
how
need to
many
get.
of them are there? What are their duties? We have 2,000 hours worth of consulting time from them over the 2 years subsequent to the purchase. And we have a separate obligation from them to show us how they shut the campground down in the winter, at the end of the season at no charge. Another kind of profitable place to explore would be to contact the town's insurance agent and say, hey, look, we're thinking about buying this property and operating a campground with 150 sites and a retail store. What's that going to do to our liability coverage premium? Can you give us an estimate? And just,
Mhm.
go to the source that's going to impose the charge instead of asking what they currently pay, because we don't know whether they're underinsured, overinsured, whether they've missed some risks. And finally, I'm trying not to take over this meeting, but I did a spreadsheet taking the $6.5 million as a 30-year level payment bond, which is what level payment bonds are typically what municipal bonds are. And I assumed an interest rate of 4%. And I figured out what it would cost a home assessed for $700,000. And I've got that spreadsheet. I did not take into consideration the residential tax exemption, which will skew the numbers lower to some degree. But I've got that. I can share it. I can send it to anybody who wants it. It's just arithmetic. There's nothing magic about it.
And Harry, do you know off the top of your head what the number is?
Yeah. Let's see here. Hang on a minute. Okay, here is, here's this. So basically what I've done is I've taken, with every level of payment, you pay interest on the outstanding principal, plus you pay one, in this case, a 30-year bond, 1/30th of the principal. So the principal payment stays the same. The interest payment, number one, depends on the interest rate, and it declines as the balance declines. So the total debt service, here it is. Typically in 2022, there would be no payments, so the first payment would be 2023. And that's about half principal and half interest. And it continues down to the very last payment where there's $8,000 worth of interest and it's all principal. So applying that with the current figures I have on the total taxable valuation of the town, I figured out what effect it has on the tax rate and what effect it would have on a $700,000 house. And so I suppose if you average these things, it works out to about $70. Another factor is we're taking $2 million worth of property off the tax rolls, and that's about 1% of the town's total taxable valuation. So that's going to push the tax rate up by about 1% also, because there's less taxable property to spread the total tax assessment across. I didn't take that into consideration either. But
Right.
anybody who wants to look at this or get a copy of it is certainly welcome to it.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah,
okay.
and then, on top of that, we've discussed, if we pass the, community impact fee for short-term rentals, applying that, which could be about $100,000 a year towards the debt service, as well as some short-term rental tax revenue. And these are speculative because they haven't been approved to do this yet, but
Well, I did
and
this from the,
CPA funds.
yeah, I did this from the standpoint of what is the town going to have to pay to retire this debt?
Mhm.
Whether it comes off the tax rate or whether it comes from some other source,
Right.
like the short-term rental tax or boat excise tax, or who knows, is important, but it's kind of secondary to the fact that the town's going to spend, basically $10 million retiring this $6.5 million debt, and people should be aware of that.
Harry, please do share this, and we'll put it in the set of input documents that we're sharing in the Google Drive folder. It's useful information that we may need to refer to.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm not sure I know anything about the Drive folder, so,
It's all right, we can take care of, if you just email it, we'll take care of it.
okay.
Mhm.
I will email it to Mike and Fred and let it percolate from there, okay?
Okay, Harry, can you bring back up the deliverables so we could just discuss that here, and
Okay,
then maybe we could take a vote?
I'm just gonna close this one for good. There you go.
So what we'd be expecting from the accountant are the deliverables here, which would be whether the property revenue and operating costs are reasonable for a project of its size and are consistent with industry standards. Identifying areas, if any, where costs do not meet these standards. The financial feasibility of continued operation of the campground and or retail store by the town, and whether there are areas where more detailed information is needed. So those would be the deliverables that we're expecting to get from the professional who's hired to do this in a written report. So is there anything else in deliverables that we'd expect? I mean, I think that's pretty comprehensive, to be honest,
Let me-
for what we need.
And let me add one phrase to this and say something like, if I probably need a comma in there. Just to make sure that, whoever it is doesn't just ask for the additional information and say, here it is. I want it kind of stirred back into the pot to make sure it doesn't change anything.
I think, I would say from our perspective, the questions are fine. Obviously, to some degree, the devil's in the details, depending on how much comes back and in what form, but I think the questions cover the areas that we'd be interested in. It's hopefully the right questions are asked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what we're asking them to do is review the information we have, report this, give us a report with the following deliverables. And if there's more detailed information that they need in order to do that, that they can seek that from the sellers,
Mhm.
right?
Do we have to be explicit about that and say that?
It says right here, seek any additional information from the town or sellers necessary to complete review.
Okay,
I mean, it's pretty specific.
yes, it is.
So members of this board, are we ready to take a vote to approve this? Yeah,
Yes.
Yes,
okay. All right, so I move to approve the RFQ financial consulting services for 80 State Highway.
I second.
Okay, roll call vote. Nancy,
Yes,
Farouk,
Yes.
Lara,
Aye.
Michael, I. Okay, thanks, Harry.
Okay, I will send you 3 documents. I'll send you this now that I've made a change to it. I'll send you the spreadsheet on a typical bond retirement schedule. And I'll also send you the spreadsheet I did with the campground reservations for 2022 that I have, that were furnished with the PNS.
Okay,
The redacted one without the names of the campers, just the campsite and the rents.
okay, that'd be great, Harry.
Okay.
And do you want to send this to Rebecca Ruffley also?
I can.
Or, just add her into the email. I'll give her a call when I get a chance to.
Mike and Becky and Fred, right?
Yeah, and probably send it to Charlie too, just so he's linked in to what's going on.
Okay. Poor Charlie.
Poor Charlie. He's on his way out. He'll be all right.
Okay.
I hope.
Okay. Do you guys need anything else from me?
I don't think so, Harry. We're just going to go over now our
Okay.
criteria for ranking different options for operations. So that's what we're going to do now.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to leave the meeting and compose an email instead.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you, gentlemen, ladies.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Okay. Good night, Harry.
Mike, do you
Okay.
want us to hang out on this or?
If you want to, if you're interested, that's fine. And these are really criteria for, ranking the different things. So there's no need for you to hang out. I don't think it's finance related at this point because we're just flushing out
Right.
basically criteria.
Can I ask
Yeah.
one quick question before you guys get going on this? Is
Sure.
there a process for finding and hiring that financial resource at this point or?
Yeah, that process is through the RFQ that we just basically approved. So that's why I had him send it to Rebecca Ruffley also, because there's a procurement process that needs to take place now. And she's our procurement officer. And so if it's over $10,000, which I don't know if it will be, to
It
be
was
honest.
3,000. It said not to exceed 3,000.
Is that what it says? 3,000, whatever it is. I'm not the procurement officer. So then 10 bids have to be, or I can't even remember, a certain amount of bids, 6 bids,
Three
maybe
bids.
three bids have to be solicited. They don't all have to be received, I guess, and then we can choose. So I'm not sure about that whole process. That's really the procurement officer, make sure that we do all that stuff by the book here.
So I could contact Rebecca if I have, I think Kathy Granlund offered that she could provide at least 3 names of CPAs that she knows could do the work.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if you need a candidate list, I guess, that would
Okay.
go to Rebecca.
Yeah, I don't know if we're selecting the person even in this group. I guess we might be. I think we were just really defining the scope of work and then it will go through administration now. So my guess is, yeah, Rebecca.
I guess the only concern would be that we do it in an expedited way so that we don't leave this poor person a week to get everything done.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I was going to get in touch with her tomorrow and just, cue her in on what's going on. And then, yeah, I think I can tell her to expect an email. And if you want to send that out in the next few days or something like that.
I will.
And then we have now till the end of June, I believe, if this document gets signed by all the parties for the due diligence here. So,
Okay.
okay. Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Good night.
Okay, Nancy, do you want to share the doc?
Sure.
Thanks.
Quiet, Joe, quiet. Hey, buddy. Shh. Joe, lie down. I'll go get him a cookie. What's your cookie?
I spied Katie back there. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Lara, sorry,
Mhm.
on vacation, so.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
here.
we're like so far north. I can't even believe it. We're like as north as the tip of Cape Breton.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you know how to share a document for you?
Here, give me a second.
Okay. Can you share?
Yeah, working on it. Just one second.
Okay, I don't know if
Yes,
I have to do
please.
something on my end.
Your screen.
Right there. that one.
Okay. Here we go.
All right, is everybody seeing it?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know how much we need to discuss this right now, but we can kind of go down the list and see if we think these are pertinent or maybe add some more. And then we can continue to just amend the doc, I think, until we have the criteria, to where it should be that we can start to actually analyze these options.
Yeah, and the bold-faced criteria were just those sort of generic
Categories.
categories in business criteria. And then I
Right.
just put questions in my own words that, we can talk about if we understand it. But I was also going to add columns to give sort of assign points when we ultimately are going
Right.
down to.
Yeah, and maybe we'll use a 5-point or a 10-point system or something like that.
Well, like a school rubric, we could even give different weight to different criteria type of
Right,
thing.
yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. So some of the things I was kind of thinking, like, the questions are kind of complicated maybe to answer through that kind of form, like what does the reservation system look like? Those kinds of
Right.
things.
Very subjective.
So I was thinking with that, is, like I know right now Maurice is, I don't know how they do their reservations. I'm guessing it's very old fashioned that they get
Yeah, it's like
called, letters.
Telephone, write it
Yeah.
down.
And that's how the North Adams campground that's run by the city, that's what they're doing. But the other campground in Salem, they're using Reserve America. And I know there's other portals. So that's kind of what I like. And if we lease it, then, it's all positive points. We don't even have to worry about it.
Right.
But with a management company, are they, are we dealing with that, or, paying for Reserve America, or they are, that I don't know, but obviously option one, we would have that.
Yeah, I think there's basically, like, if we lease to the campground or hire a management operation company, they're similar, but they're different in a lot of ways, because the management company would be basically running it on behalf of the town. And then
Right.
all the expenses incurred would be incurred by the town. And then all the profit would be received by the town. And we would just be basically hiring someone to do all the managing, hiring,
Right.
firing, collecting of monies. And it's a little bit more complicated than leasing it, but potentially the town could make more money that way,
Right.
depending
Right.
on how much there is in wiggle room there.
Right.
So I guess my first comment really would be, like, maybe these criteria need to be broken up in, like, so ease of implementation is like basically the main criteria, right? And then you
A
have
category of criteria.
the category is ease of implementation. And then maybe it needs to be something like instead of like saying like how many contracts will the town need to create or administer, it would be like complexity of contracting or something like that.
Okay. Yep.
As the actual criteria, because we can write a little reason why each one meets that criteria underneath there or something like that, if we want to bring it out of the spreadsheet format. But we're not going to be able to answer that question in a rating. You know what I mean?
Yep.
One thing I was wondering is, at one end of the spectrum of how much work we put into this, you would have almost like a business plan for each of these three criteria as to, what are all the expenses, what are all the incomes, and it'll be more complex.
Right.
Is that
I
going
don't
overboard?
see it that way. I think that's probably a little bit like more than we need to do. I think we need to lay out the three options and sort of with a broad brush go, these are the pluses and minuses of these three options. And if we get to a point where we want to make a recommendation, we'll have rated that criteria to the point where we can say, well, listen, A, we do not recommend, B, we recommend, or B and C, we recommend, but with these caveats or whatever, however that may be. But I don't think we need to get really, really into the weeds here, because basically this is a determination. This is a rate ranking of the options and maybe a recommendation from this group, but we're only 4 people. And I think this is really a broad brush kind of thing, where we go through and sort of think about the key components of doing each of these things. And, you can kind of come up with a scenario of like, when we decide, so maybe one of the criteria is like, is financial, like, I guess profitability for the town.
Yeah, I think I put those
That
down
might be down lower.
below, like,
Yeah, annual profits and losses. So when we go through that and we look at like what the profit and loss is from, maybe we don't get there until we get the information back from the accountant, but maybe we can do that even with what we just have, once we know what the Gothiers are paying themselves totally outside of that. We can look at what the potential profit is for the town if they were to like operate it itself. And then we can kind of figure out what, maybe a management company would cost, and the potential for the town to make money if we were to use a management company, and then what we could theoretically maybe lease the thing for, and
Mhm.
see, where those fall. And we're not going to make it an exact science, I don't think.
right, right.
So like that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, but I don't know.
Ease of staffing.
Yeah. So, this is shared with all of you, and
Yeah,
you can either use the edit feature and suggest edits for me,
yeah.
or you could, if you just want to read it and then like just email them to me too,
I'll try the edit thing. I've done that before. Yeah, that'll
Yeah.
be fun. They're like suggested edits that come in on the side.
Right. And then
Yeah.
I look at them and
You can add a comments column as well, right? So people could just drop comments.
I could do that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we can just kind of look through this and maybe we can just make suggestions and amendments until we meet again, and hopefully Susan will be involved in that too. And I think, do you guys all feel like the same way about how we should go about this?
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying in terms of our priorities.
Yeah, and the broad brush here. I think it's just important when it comes to a town meeting vote, that we looked at these 3 options. This is the one these are the 1, or these are the 2 that are most feasible, or whatever it is. This is
here's
the one
why.
that's most feasible
Well, and be ready to answer a question if someone
because
says,
of, yeah,
why aren't you doing it this way, like such
exactly.
and such a town is, or
Right. And we're not here to decide this. We're here to just either recommend it or rank it in a
Right.
way, like somebody else is going to make the decision, the select board, most likely, or the town administrator, if he's charged to make the decision of how we would do this in the end. And hopefully they will use what we give them. But this is really a sort of guide for, I think, voters to understand that these are the options that are there for this, because it's a big question mark, like who's going to do it, how's the town going to hire people, this and that. There's a lot of questions floating around in the ether. So I think
Right.
that's the point of what we're here to do, is to say, these are basically the 3 things or 4 things. If we come up with another way of this happening, I don't really think there is one, but there's maybe some scenarios where the town would just run the trailers and leave everything alone, like that's one
Right.
option. That's a scenario that maybe we need to look at also, because that's the only thing that we're required to do by the purchase and sale. We don't have to operate the store or the campground as a day campground. The only thing we're required to do is to keep the operation of the trailer park, basically.
Okay, right.
Camper section, which is everything but 5 acres of the lot. But that's a lot easier for the town to do also, is to just collect rents, have an operator that we hire to collect those rents and make sure nothing's going wrong, it's a different
Right.
type of, so maybe we should include that as one of our options,
Okay, yep, okay.
just the overall. Now
Just,
there's four options, I guess.
okay, just operating
The
the
campground.
summer campground, the full time,
Yeah,
the
just operating a full-time trailer.
campground. Yeah, what do they call that? The residence?
Yeah, I guess so.
I'll look it
The
up. I know the
resident,
term
yeah,
for
whatever
it.
it's called. We'll figure that
Yeah.
out, what we call
The
it.
seasonal residence,
Yeah,
yes.
and maybe it makes sense if we were to doing that, then lease the store to someone,
Mhm. Yeah. Yep, okay. Yeah, so
something
I'll,
like that.
sure, and we'll share this and you guys can look at it and
Yeah, that
see-
sounds good.
and we'll also work on, this was just sort of a brainstorming more than anything else.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm so glad you put it together because I just don't have the wherewithal to do it. So it's really great.
I know
And-
that on Friday, you know how where the bigger group is meeting at Preservation Hall?
Uh-huh.
Frederick and I are going to be away. I just wanted you both to
Okay.
know.
All right. Well, I'll probably be able to go to that one. So that's
Thank
no
you.
big deal. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. That's great. So I'll just have whatever we get to at this point. I'll print it and bring it down there in case anybody wants to see it. And I guess we're not really ready to share it with the bigger group yet anyways, because it's not even there, but
Right, you can have it in case somebody asks.
yeah, we're doing something.
Yeah.
So, okay, so do we want to just, keep the meetings going on a semi-regular basis so that we just, keep meeting up and staying on top of it?
Yeah,
I don't think we need to do anything more tonight. We can do this all through the Google Doc and
right.
making suggestions that way. So I don't know, maybe we can meet, we can probably meet in 2 weeks because we did the most pressing thing that we needed to do right now, which was to just get that scope of work thing done.
Mhm.
And so over the next 2 weeks, we can probably just work on making suggestions to this, and when we have a chance, like looking at it and trying to hone it in, and then we can bring it back to the next meeting on like maybe June. So I don't know when my Affordable Housing Trust meeting is. That's Mondays also.
Okay.
But I don't know when we're meeting yet. Let me just look that up. What, Monday? What's your schedules like? Is Monday good?
Yes,
Monday evenings? Okay. I'll just text Harry because I don't think I was at the last meeting. I missed it. So I'll just text him, but let's just plan on the 6th at 7 if that works for you guys.
yes, that'll be good.
And then we'll have town meeting on the 11th. So I don't think these meetings need to be very long, and maybe at some point when we all feel comfortable, we can kind of meet in person someday. So, and just kind of brainstorm that way, because I think that does help on something like this.
Well, and I think for me, having a meeting, a Zoom meeting is sort of, it's like school. It's having a deadline.
Yeah,
to get
exactly.
something done.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, we've got another meeting. I gotta get this done. And it's hard to keep rolling when you're
Yeah.
only meeting once a month or something. So
And
I think that's good.
we'll also check if that scope of work came through and where that's at and make, because if we don't
Yeah.
see anything, then we know we better push on that.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna put it in my calendar here, June 6th. I'll email you guys if I have a conflict that I don't know about, and we'll figure something else out, okay?
Okay,
All right, thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Lara.
Move to
Bye.
adjourn.
Bye.
Let's Do that, all right. Bye.
Mike goes, I can be there on Friday, this Friday.
Okay, cool, I'll see you there.
Okay,
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Bye, Lara.
bye.
Bye, Farouk, Nancy. Thanks.
Bye, Lara.